that might integrate with those GIS specific applications. Next, you're starting to look across needs. We're looking at current uses and needs in terms of the patterns of use of GIS. And I'll show you a technique in one slide here on what I mean by that. But there you're looking to see how is GIS being leveraged and where are the gaps, where are the challenges, where are the opportunities. And then it's looking to see what is really an assessment. What is this a good fit for what you've got? Are you leveraging GIS to best effect? Are there gaps, not just in technology, but are there gaps in terms of the staffing you've got? Or is there gaps in terms of the organizational structure that you've got? Are there service delivery challenges that you have? So the point there is to really understand the business, understand what your GIS environment currently offers, and understand the needs that are going to drive your plan in the future. So one tool that we use for this is these patterns of use. I'm sure a lot of you folks have seen them already, and I certainly find them very valuable in that exercise of looking at what the current use cases are, like how is GIS being used broadly in a business sense by different users, but also looking for gaps. So I'm looking at different business capability areas. So for example, if we're working within, public works department, might be talking about pest control, might be talking about tree maintenance. I'm looking for different ways that they are currently leveraging these 6 patterns, and I'm looking for opportunities as well. Could they be using field mobility collection tools for tree maintenance programs? Are they currently using them, or could they be using them better? Is there analytics that can be employed here for looking at proximity to roads and looking at traffic patterns and the impact on the tree program? So these are really nice ways of sort of instead of thinking just mapping and functional uses of GIS, it's more framing, I think, the usage of GIS in ways that are a little bit more compartmentalized and a little bit more use kind of oriented. And at the bottom here in the link, and we'll work on providing you with these slides after this session, but there's a link to the article that Wade mentioned that talks about this and some other techniques in terms of mapping these patterns into your different user areas. The second step, like I said, was trends and best practices. So what we want to know here is, it's constantly changing the industry of GIS. I'm sure you are all aware of that. And so is the bigger, broader world of digital, of location-based technologies. As well as industries are changing as well. There's always, especially in local government, there's always changing pressures, changing drivers and sociological trends, economic trends that are impacting what's going on. So it's important to really have a good handle on what those trends are and what are the sort of the best practices, or at least good examples from other peers in your area or in your in the world, perhaps, of who's supporting and who's sort of addressing some of these trends, and how are they delivering their GIS capability to their organization. So conducting a scan by reaching out to peers, or having the help do research online, attending these kinds of seminars is a great way to actually understand what others are doing and incorporate it into your plan. Because it is always effective, I think, when selling your plan, understanding what others are doing and how you're going to adopt some of the good work and good practices that those peers are doing. Step 3 is your vision. And this is really, now you're getting into it. Now you're getting into, so you understand the baseline, you know what's going on in the industry, you understand the trends. Now it's just time to establish and understand what you want to be when you grow up. This is that classic exercise of understanding the vision, your mission, your guiding principles, establishing your goals. And this is really important, because this is where you're going to basically build, this is off of the vision, you're going to be defining what your capability model and what your plan is. And it's going to be there for some period of time to help you make decisions around what your technology stack and environment is going to look like. It's going to help you decide what your staffing complement is going to look like. It's going to help you decide what and who is involved in governance, and what do you need to govern more closely, what is okay in its current state. So one thing I like to do then is walk through those questions that we started with at the beginning in a visioning exercise. So some of the things I might ask when we're going through a bit of visioning for the geospatial programs is we start with that, what is our aspiration? And so I'd talk about, asking questions around what role should GIS play in your organization? What value should it play? What does it currently provide? And what should it provide to users, to stakeholders, to external agencies, to businesses? Like, what is it that you want to accomplish with your GIS program? With that, a handle on that, you want to talk now a bit about where you want to focus. What are your guiding principles? This is around information, around technology, around business. Some of these things can come out, things like around open data. Are you open data by default, or are you at a best efforts kind of basis? You can have a business principle that's around data-driven decision-making or cross-department collaboration as a guiding principle that you want to promote and encourage across all divisions through the GIS. There could be application principles, security and simplicity first, could have an on-premise type of deployment strategy, lots of decisions that need to be made and really honed in on related to your technology principles. These are really important, like I said, in making decisions around your strategy. And then the last question is your strategic goal. This is the focus areas. Given the focus areas, this is really what you need to accomplish. Like, what are the goals that are going to drive your programs and activities and plans for the next 1, 2, 5 years, based on what your vision is, based on what your guiding principles are. So going through this exercise is a really good exercise. It really does hone your thinking. It's an iterative process, because once you realize your aspiration, once you get to your focus areas, you might want to change your aspiration. But once you come to that in a collaborative process with those key stakeholders within your organization, then you'll get, I think, a pretty strong and a concrete vision in place. The fourth of 5 here, so one last one after this, is the capability model. And this is where you really define, you're really getting now, you have your vision in place, you have your strategy. What do you need to have in place in terms of your technology, in terms of your workforce, in terms of your delivery mechanisms and service management, in terms of governance? So this is really an exercise now in putting together options. There's any infinite ways of going forward with this. To achieve your vision, there might be many different ways you could do this, but you want to produce one capability direction. And so looking at options, packages, or combinations of technology, decisions, workforce, delivery, governance, putting together options then and conduct an evaluation of based on value. I mean, that's what we're looking for here, is what is the strategic value that's going to be in your pros and cons that you're going to be delivered by these combinations of options. What are the risks of going with one technology stack over another, or one workforce model or another? And it's a case of doing a sort of advantages and disadvantages comparison and making a choice ultimately as to what direction is a good fit for your organization. So that's really the second half of that step 5 critical question concept. So what capabilities do we need? So asking around what are the technology, workforce, governance, delivery models? And then ultimately, how do you manage that? Once you've made a choice of what you want, what do you need to do to manage these? So is it what kind of performance metrics, KPIs, or programs are needed to make sure that the plan is on track, is achieving the goals that you set out at the beginning? And so part of it is all about value, as I say. I mean, evaluating your capability model. I would like this diagram here because it really does make that case that your GIS capability at the bottom there is really defined by your business, right? What you need in place in terms of your technology, your workforce, delivery, and governance is defined by the direction of the business. The purpose of that capability model is to enable that business through those business capability areas. And ultimately then that should be creating value. Should be creating value in different ways, whether it's a foundational value, something you just need to do, perhaps data management, asset management. It's core value, which is perhaps it's creating new productivity tools, mobile collection tools, drone data capture, things like that, things that improve the efficiency and the productivity of the workforce. And strategic value, something that could be seen as a major source of advantage for the city or municipality that you're working in. Things like community hubs is one that's becoming more and more common as something that is there to drive business, drive drive quality of life, meet those strategic aims of the city itself. And so the last thing that you do is, of course, this has to have a plan. This has to be put into some kind of roadmap. And that's really the end game for a strategic plan. So then the process is looking at packaging up your projects, your activities, your investments that you need to build that capability model, achieve those goals. You put it into a sequenced phased, usually kind of a roadmap, prioritized according to some kind of concepts of value and risk. So looking at ROI on the value side, looking at strategic alignment on the value side, looking at the risk criteria, so looking at the change impact, looking at the complexity to implement, looking at fit. Those are kinds of criteria that you want to develop to really look at what your different work packages are and where on your sequence of events they need to happen. Typically, there's some kind of foundational work that has to come up front before other things. Maybe you're establishing a governance committee. Maybe you're doing a big upgrade of infrastructure. Often those foundational elements have to come first in your plan, so they weigh higher on your priority. Whereas something that's a little bit more researchy, innovation oriented might fall later once you have those foundational pieces in place. But ultimately with all this in place, with your current state, with your trends and best practices, your vision, your strategy, capability model, your plan, you're really ready now to get this validated, move it out and get support from your senior management. And that's really the end game here is you put together a plan that's structured, it's value driven, it's aligned, and now it's time to get support. And so putting it together in a nice package that is presentable, consumable, hits all the points, shows the measures and value back to senior management is really where you want to get the support from those folks. So the key takeaways is just an experience. Focus on understanding the business need. That's obviously going to be the most important thing. It's easy to get really wrapped up in how you're going to upgrade or what tools are you going to build, or do we need a developer? Do I need to hire a DBA? Or am I going to start contracting out work? It's easy to get wrapped up in the GIS-y kinds of conversations early on because that's where we're comfortable. But I'd say really focus on reaching out and understanding what the needs are of the business, from the business. And that's not just their day-to-day work. That's what are they trying to accomplish on their 5-year roadmap, right? Because that's the point, is we want to align and help support that. GIS is very much an enabling kind of a technology. And we want to make sure that that's aligned to what their direction is. The second is, like I said, that's kind of the second point, which is make sure the vision and capability model match the business needs, but aligns with the business and IT strategy. And that second part, in the IT strategy, is important because, GIS does not exist in isolation. And often even though sometimes it might, in reality, it is part of the larger information technology complement. It does work as part of any kind of enterprise system. It does usually consume data from other systems. It provides data to other systems. It's part of the overall IT picture. And so understanding what the direction is from your broader IT concept is really important as well, to make sure that the GIS direction is aligned to that. I said think holistically. Don't just think tech, also think people, process, and governance. This is really important. Who's going to support this? Do you have the training in place? Are stakeholders involved in making decisions about your data, your stewardship, your investments? 4 is show how your strategy creates value and be honest about the risks. That's really important. It's never a case of putting together a plan is going to create X number of opportunities for new revenue or cost savings without some kind of risk. So it's important to acknowledge where there's significant change involved, or there's going to be some complexity, or there's going to be some kind of engagement required and convincing required. So it's important that you're balancing your value with your risk. And then last is sell your plan. Sell it up, sell it down to your folks, sell it across the organization to the other divisions, sell it to external parties, to the public, wherever you need to get that support and do it in a way that is effective in terms of communication, is well packaged, well presented, and hits on all the different kinds of questions that the folks in your community are asking. So that's, with that, I think I've used up my 20 minutes, just about. So I want to turn it over to the guys and to the folks on the online, and if any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Awesome. That was really great, Matthew. I'm going to share the poll results here. So 16% say that you do have a strategic plan and it is current. 29% say you do have a strategic plan, but it is dated. And then 55% of you say you do not have a strategic plan. So what Matthew just laid out, those 5 items will definitely get you in the direction of moving forward and actually getting to a yes out of that no. So thank you. I really appreciate that. One comment I do want to make is that when you are putting in that GIS strategic plan together, make sure that it is in line with your organization's mission or vision, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to give you the support. They're the ones that are going to be giving you the funding and the green light to move forward with what you put in your strategic plan. So you do definitely want to make sure that you're not going rogue and that you are in line with the organization. So I just want to throw that comment out there.
And Tim had a question, a good one. And it would be interesting to hear what you think, Matthew, in terms of, if you had a GIS program that was fairly mature and established, do they go through any particular different approach than, say, a young or a small program in terms of preparing a strategic plan?
I don't know if so much the maturity. I mean, I think the structure is still very similar. I still think you need to just follow those 5 basic steps. More mature program, though, is probably starting to think about different more advanced topics. They might be thinking about how can they embrace some of the new trends in technology? How can they play a greater role within the city and their organization? So it might be just the focus of the plan and how they elevate their game, shall we say, is a little bit more, it's just different in terms of their strategic choices. And we might start to talk more about more complex forms of governance, more, shall we say, centralized or sort of more complex organizational structures as well, whether you have a dedicated GIS group versus some combination of a centralized team and some resources forming kind of centers within the different divisions. So I'd say it becomes more like, it's not necessarily the process to develop a plan is different, it's just the context of what you're putting into the plan is different.
You may also have the opportunity to reference the great projects and the difference that they made, as an example of, in order to underscore the relevancy of where you want to take GIS, you have that opportunity to go back a few years and pull out your most relevant and impactful projects, just as a way to, loosen up the audience. But speaking about the audience, my question is this, Matt. The particular audience that you're drafting the strategic plan for, I think, is one of those things that kind of needs to be identified. But would you also recommend an executive summary that winds up getting to the point for the benefit of an executive to not have to know necessarily how you plan on implementing, where really maybe it's more focused on the why and the what?
Yeah, that's usually what we do, which is what I would recommend is there's a few things that an executive summary would contain. What you'd want to see is what they're thinking about. So the priorities of, let's say, if it's of the city, priorities of the city, what's going to be established from the GIS and how it's going to support and drive programs and drive value in that way. That's what you want to labor on. And then, of course, there needs to be a little bit of information about the general progress and plan you plan to make and the cost behind that. But really, the emphasis should be on how your vision of GIS aligns with the vision of what technology and what the city as a general whole is trying to accomplish. It should definitely be more on the what and the why as opposed to the how.
Okay. So Adam had a question. Can Toby, Wade, Tim provide concrete examples about how something did or did not work relative to their government organizations when executing their GIS strategic plan? Toby, anything come to mind?
You know, actually, I am in the boat of I do not have a GIS strategic plan. So that's why this webinar was exceptionally important to myself, because that is something that was on my bucket list that I need to get accomplished. So I will actually be going through those 5 steps and making it happen. So,
okay. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, I can add here. I'll give you something that that did work or seemed to have worked. Our approach to our plan was to really focus on value and show, like, where I work is in a county government in the IT department. And what we found when I was developing the plan, or the team was developing the plan with me, was that our IT is generally internally focused, right? Infrastructure, operations, those types of things. And what I learned was the stuff that we were doing were often for other agencies and even the public. So it was almost like a consulting arm of our own IT department. You know, how can we reach out? So instead of internally facing, we were sort of externally facing. And that's how I kind of drafted the rest of it. And I kind of approached it as we're a consultant now. We're a consultant for our own agency, and we can go out there and kind of sell our wares and sell our product. So that was, you know, that's something to think about, you know, because a lot of folks in my, you know, in my realm, and this probably happens to many of us, is they don't think of us much more than maybe map makers sometimes, or, you know, just folks that deal with maps. So they don't understand the value that we provide in terms of analysis and other levels of data sets, other things that we can provide. So we focus more on the solutions. We focus more that we are a solution provider and less a mapping department.
Good.
One comment I do want to make is that, you know, City of Riverside, we have some really legacy systems here. And we've been trying to move the needle and get off of ArcInfo and get into the ArcGIS world. But, and a lot of that has to do with funding and economics and championing the whole process. But the other thing that's happening, though, you know, we also have a utility here at the city. And as we keep discussing our migration and moving into the new world, you got this whole utility network. It's like, you know, that's been in beta for like a couple of years. And it's like, well, you know, we initially were moving to the geometric network, and that was part of our initial migration plan. But since we put things off for quite some time, it's now the utility network is in place. And it's like, well, now we're having to shift gears and, you know, kind of revamp this whole idea of our strategic plan and which way do we want to go? Do we want to adopt the new ArcGIS Pro? You know, that's something that is going to be needed to help support that utility network. So there's a lot of us that were in limbo. You know, we're in limbo of, you know, sticking with the true and tested geometric network, or, you know, now just waiting for that, you know, getting out of the beta version of the utility network that just came out. So we had a lot of strife with that.
I have one example, I guess I'd like to contribute in terms of things that I think worked well for us. Can I share my screen there, Toby?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Let's see. As soon as I figure out how to do it. Oh, there it is. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep. It's beautiful.
Cool. Okay, so this is just an Excel spreadsheet that that I made up, and it follows a lot of the some of the things that Matthew had written about in his article. And perhaps this is kind of taking me back to my Esri days, but I too identified the key GIS support functions, and they followed those business practices that Esri's been preaching for a long time. If the wording looks a little different, it's because it's of an earlier generation of that. But what this represents is an opportunity for you to examine where your GIS efforts exist and where they don't exist. And this is a great way for you to begin to prioritize where you spend your time. So if you can kind of approach these business support functions while at the same time you identify core functions and business systems. So let me give you an example, kind of what this looks like for one of our divisions here at Department of Natural Resources. So we looked at business systems in terms of, there's 3 main programs in this division: forestry, fire, and state lands. And if we looked at the major business systems, and I think what Matthew would say is his equivalent to this was capabilities. So the GIS, or the capabilities of that business unit. But it's a process of identifying where GIS is playing a part and where it is not, so that you can visually begin to pick this up, because there are so many places, so many applications or map exercises that you could be in play with, and it's just really hard to keep them all in your head and organized so that you can find out where a gap or an opportunity comes into play. And then one of the other observations is that sometimes all of a particular organization's work units may have some shared business tasks. And when there are more than one thing, like project management, more than one program does project management, then you get more value if you try to produce a GIS information product or a workflow enhancement in that particular business task. So if this is of any value, I'll go ahead and send and put this up on our what is it?
Slack group.
Slack group.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, so so that's all I have to share on that.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I mean, you mentioned something there, Wade, about the business capability. For me, that's the kind of what I would say the right altitude. It's the right level for this kind of planning. It sits between your strategy, which is a little bit, if you're trying to align your GIS solutions and applications to your business strategy, it's a little bit abstract, a little bit difficult to figure out what exactly those solutions should be at it when you're looking at what the business strategy is. Likewise, maybe a little too detailed is the process level, which is different workflows and inputs with different activities and outputs. The capability kind of sits in a nice area, right, sweet spot right between those two, and that what you're focusing on with the business capabilities and outcomes, like you're trying to accomplish something, and it's accomplished through people, process, technology. And so that's the point, is that when I say something like pest control, like when I said road disruption management, for example, that's a good business capability of your usually of some kind of road operations division or subdivision. And if you're working and looking at what are the solutions in those 6 pattern areas that would support or better support, say, road disruption management capability, you get a better sense of what are they trying to accomplish in that area, what are the tools that would be a good fit, and how would they play nicely with all the other tools that they're using for behavior management, social media types of applications for communicating road disruption. So it becomes a kind of a nice unit of work, I would say, for this type of strategic planning exercise. So sometimes in that current state assessment, one of the first tasks is just even going through and identifying what those are and documenting what are the business capabilities in my different departments. Sometimes they're not well known, not well kind of articulated, and so doing that is a really good exercise.
Okay, so Toby did maybe answer a lot of questions about how to join Slack. So he went ahead and put up the invite. Hopefully everybody can click on that, and it's just a matter of participating. There's no required email extensions or anything like that. It's open to everybody.
That's correct. So I'm going to post another poll, and it's what have been your impedances in developing or maintaining a GIS strategic plan? So we'll have, could be time, could be the tools available, the techniques, staffing resources, funding, even the pace of technology. And then also missing the organizational support and buy-in. The pace of technology has just really been pushing forward in the past few years. And so even with like Portal, you know, that has been a game changer from the way things have been done in the past. So, you know, getting your strategic plan to align with those technologies, I can definitely see it be challenging.
I'd say as well the pace of the broader technology tech change. I mean, especially the impact of, you know, Internet of Things and some of these bigger macro trends that we all hear about and know about or gearing up for, autonomous vehicles and smart grid and smart, you know, all these kinds of macro trends that are really changing the pace or the sort of the purpose and the direction of cities. And almost all of it has a geospatial basis to it in a lot of respects. And so I've certainly heard from different organizations, they're really now getting a lot of demand for being more responsive with data, providing real-time data, being able to support big data analysis and things like that. And it's really stretching the limits of a lot of folks.
Yeah, we're definitely experiencing that here in Riverside. You know, we have an innovation group that has just been put together, and GIS is part of that group. And so we definitely are feeling the need to provide that analysis and innovate along with the other businesses within the city. So yeah, it's, you know, putting a strategic plan that incorporates that element with it too is you can see a challenge there.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a comment too, just in a strategic plan in general. If nothing else, it's good to have one just for awareness of what it is that you do. I'll give you an example from a colleague at the city of Dallas. There was a recession in the early aughts, and they looked at GIS as a cost center, right? Like, well, here, why don't we just jettison GIS and that'll save the city so much money? And it wasn't until that manager was able to explain, well, if you get rid of GIS, you're getting rid of 911, you're getting rid of 311, you're getting rid of these integrated systems that GIS has become a core. So I think part of the strategic plan should be reminding people where, you know, the GIS isn't an one-off or a silo. It's actually integrated with all these other systems that people use daily. And I think the more you can do that, the more you can not only find value for yourself, but then remind others how valuable it is to have such a GIS group with you.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just putting a different spin on the context as well. It's like what's your city's geospatial strategy, you know, as opposed to sometimes folks see the GIS strategy as that group of, you know, couple of folks that are supporting it within IT, and you know it kind of loses its luster perhaps, or maybe gets lost in some of the other strategies that are being put together. But if you start to put the context, no, you actually need to add geospatial as a fundamental part of running a city or municipality or any sort of level of government. Mm-hmm. This is speaking to that level. I think you just get a much better reaction.
Yes, our poll results show the highest issue is time. 74% say time. And then
yeah, and that's not surprising.
Yeah, and then the next one is the techniques. Excuse me, the how-to, which you know, Matthew, you just offered. You know, that how-to to get out of the starting blocks and start putting that document together.
Yeah.
So Matt, you know, You've done a lot with strategic plans. You've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of industries. Do you have any best practices that, you know, maybe some things that people can take away with?
I think you know, the best practices, the main takeaways are, like I said, I kind of said at the end of the presentation, is really understand what at least some subsection of your business is wanting to do. It's tendency to just kind of stick to the knitting and provide a mapping function and manage data. But if you're doing, just take a step to reach out to a couple of the different departments that you have a good relationship with. Understand learn more about what they do day to day, what they're trying to accomplish, and then really just use those things, like those patterns they use. They're really easy. Anybody can do it. I can do it. Wade can do it. Go through, look at what their business is trying to accomplish, and sort of demonstrate where all those opportunities are, and where they're currently struggling as well. And I think if you just start to at least even build it with just one area, you'll start to get a lot of, and you put it together in a way that makes a lot of sense, shows the value. Then you'll start to build up a bit of the momentum, I think, towards getting maybe a broader, bigger strategic plan in place. Ideally, you're doing it for every department where you work, but if you can't, then do what you can and start somewhere where you know you can make some impact.
I think one of the things that I would add to that is that you know, in terms of maybe a best practice for GIS managers is to get out of the mindset of being a GIS manager for a second and put yourself in the executive shoes. And you know, if you were the number 2 person in your organization, you know, what would you hope that you would be able to influence? You know, you've got the executive that's often busy doing high-level things, but at the same time, he relies on a number 2 to effectively run the organization and make him look good. So what would you do, not as a GIS manager, but what would you do as the number 2 person in the organization, that chief operating officer type of mentality that maybe is not the typical way that you approach your work, but maybe has some impact or some context that you can add into your strategic plan, and you know, maybe just look at it from their perspective on what you think might benefit that kind of a reader of your strategic plan. So Toby, we have about 8 more minutes. You have another question?
Yeah, I think so. Let me see here. Yes, the third one. What is the most important message you would hope your leadership takes away from your current or future GIS strategic plan? So we have multiple answers here. GIS is currently underutilized, or the organization will benefit from more GIS investment and funding. GIS can produce meaningful change, but requires more leadership support. Another one is more understanding of why GIS is important to the organization and better understanding of your vision of GIS. I know I get a lot of this, more understanding of why GIS is important to the organization. I get a lot of people talking about that and asking me how to combat that. And definitely, it is a form of marketing that you have to do to the different departments to show value. You know, that it's not going to cost them a lot out of their budget in order to get a lot of benefit. You know, I have to compliment Esri about that with the you know, the templates and the things that they have with AGOL. It's pretty much just, you know, configure, you know, COTS and turn the key, and then you're off and running. So that's been really beneficial, and it doesn't take this, you know, 6-month turnaround time to get an application put together and posted, and then actually start seeing results. So that is one thing that has been beneficial to show the capabilities of GIS.
Toby, I don't know if you've noticed, Deanne had a very good question or experience that maybe Matthew can help out with. My experience with organizational buy-in includes fear of or refusal to learn new technology so that GIS can be utilized at a maximum level. How would you address something like that, Matt?
And that's always a challenge. I mean, I think there's a few tactics. That one is build easy to use tools and promote ease of use over sort of complex and monolithic types of applications. I'm not saying that's any kind of catch-all for everything, but that's certainly one thing, is that I think there is still a perception that GIS is for professionals and for trained individuals on, you know, complex software, and you know, there's always a need for that, and there always will be for some use cases, but I think so much more what's out there now is very easy to use, very consumer friendly applications. And so promoting that kind of quick deployment, ease of use, little zero training philosophy in everything you do is really important. I think as well, if you can get a champion at a leadership level who is a bit tech savvy and has a few apps that they like to show off in meetings and get their people involved and engaged on, that can go a really long way. Then it's not you being the champion for GIS, basically somebody who's already well trained and well versed in it. It's somebody who's basically new to it, but is seeing the results, saying how easy it is. They just have more credibility with those who are fearing the change. So I think if you can kind of get those two things going for you, it'll certainly help the change process for sure.
We can't hear you, Toby.
You're on mute.
You know, I knew that was going to happen at one point in time. So our highest response is more understanding of why GIS is important to the organization. So that's definitely a point of contention. Yeah, this polling's great. I really appreciate you guys chiming in. This really kind of gives us a great context of what you guys are feeling and what you guys are having to contend with. And so it helps us definitely produce questions and try to define some answers for you guys on these things. So thank you very much.
I'll just comment on this poll on a real quick, is that for me, I would hope that a plan, it's really number two. It's that if an executive is reading it, that they now understand the benefit of this. You know, they understand why it's so important to the achieving the goals of the city or the organization generally. I mean, that's ultimately what any strategy should be demonstrating, is why spend your money on this? You know, why invest? Why not? Because there's only limited funds to go around, as we all know. And if it's not going to be put in GIS, it'll be put into something else. So why GIS?
Yeah, I would add that this only underscores the other points you made, Matthew, and that is you have to spend time to understand the business objectives, because the leadership of your organization is concerned about the organization being successful. So your ability to understand how that happens, what is necessary to make that happen, and the way in which you can articulate that, like Deanne's question, is possibly focusing on what difference you can make, not the technology that you use, but if you become aware of a bottleneck, a backlog, your strategic thinking would say, how can we speed up work so that the backlog goes away? That's what the business leaders know, and that's the pain they feel, is backlog. They feel lack of service. Maybe they're not getting reviewed very well. These are the things that keep the executives up at night, and your ability to know the organization well enough to know the flow of work and what tends to get in its way, and your ability to match those needs, those pain points with your insight into how better data management, better spatial, data integration into a workflow can help to produce that desirable outcome. That's kind of the golden ticket, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of times as well, the you're right. A lot of the work that needs to be done is foundational, I would say, and that that I've seen in strategies is sometimes that's the end. That's all that's in the strategy. And unfortunately, if you were like doing an upgrade, or if you're doing some investment in acquiring some data, doing some data management cleanup, things like that, it's unfortunately very important, as we know, and it has to happen. But if the strategy only touches on those, there's no real, it's hard for the business folks to actually see what that's going to get them ultimately. And so I'd say it's understandable that there's a lot of foundational building blocks that need to be put in place, but really focus on, if you can, articulating the upstream value and the upstream business uses of all this that they're going to get out of it. And then in the early going as well, deliver that stuff. You know, if you can get some quick wins in there where you're building up some momentum and some goodwill, you'll get further along in all that really important foundational work that has to happen under that. So I'd say just try to really focus on getting something out into people's hands that they can use and be happy with quickly.
Awesome. Hey, I really appreciate everything that you've provided us, Matthew. I want to be respectful for everyone's time. This was an hour-long webinar, and you definitely dropped the value bombs, which I did tell everyone in LinkedIn that it's coming. And you definitely delivered, and I really appreciate that. Just a few last-minute announcements. Don't forget to join the Slack community. It's gissuccess.slack.com. The conversations continue there. Also, tomorrow you'll be getting an email from Zoom, and it will have a feedback survey. Those are really important to us. We read everyone's comments, and we tweak this program to meet your needs. And you guys wanted more roundtable and less PowerPoint, and that's what we did. We definitely brought out more roundtable. Lastly, I just posted on LinkedIn an ask question, and that is to provide me your biggest GIS challenges. We are tailoring the blog and our content to meet those needs, but we need to know what your challenges are. And that is something that I really value and want to focus my time on. So those were the three things I wanted to provide. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Wade. Thank you, Matthew. Any last words you guys would have?
If anybody wants to put in a recommendation for the next webinar topic, feel free to type that in before you bail out.
Very good.
And I'll quickly add, I think folks were asking about the slides, so maybe, yeah, I'm happy to provide them. I'll send them along to you, Toby, if you want to post them and then have that.
Awesome. Awesome. We definitely
thanks for inviting me
for that. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. And it's a beautiful day, and we will see you next time on the GIS Peer Success Webinar. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Y'all have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye. Thanks.
Thanks.